Our top story for tonight is Xavier Worthy of a first-round pick in your fantasy drafts and perhaps in the real-life NFL draft. Xavier Worthy, former Texas star wide receiver, put on a show at the NFL Combine this past weekend, and there's been buzz. We'll get more into what this means for fantasy and for real life. But it's exciting to hear the name Xavier Worthy even coming up behind the names of Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Of course, this doesn't really change the landscape. He doesn't just usurp into that tier. But what we do want to acknowledge is the difference-making speed that teams will be looking for and investing in. We saw John Ross get first-round draft capital in his just post his combine. So will Xavier Worthy get first-round draft capital? That, a few other notes from the combine, and some transactions that teams have been making over the last few days. All of that and more right after this. Hey, y'all, Bradley Stalder here doing Player Profiler today, and I'm loving it. This is great. We're bringing you the news. We're bringing you things that are valuable. And a couple weeks ago, I just wanted to bring this up because I got a little bit of hate mail. Some people said, hey, Bradley, you reported on the Giants not wanting to re-sign Saquon Barkley, and look what happened. They are letting Saquon test free agency, and that's what Jordan Ronan had said. And I was simply reporting on that, but there were some people who were pushing back and saying, you're just speculating. You're just, no, like we had reports and we have reasons why we believe all of these things. And that's why Player Profiler News is such a valuable resource for you here at Player Profiler, is because we are not just making up our opinion. We will share our opinions for sure. We will give, our best thoughts, but it is based on fact. It is based on truth. It is based on what the beat reporters are telling us. And then we're going to take whatever truth it is and offer our opinion. What is actionable? What can you make a difference for in what news is all about? Can you change your mind about something? And so are we changing our mind about Saquon Barkley or whatever news item? The answer is yes. So when we get record-breaking performances at the Combine, Xavier Worthy now puts himself on the map, right? He set a record 40-yard dash, 4.21 seconds in his second attempt. Remember, in his first attempt, he ran a 4.25, which would have been still the fastest of the day. So I think he cemented himself as a first-round pick, given the pedigree of the other players who have run that type of speed. I mean, let's also take a moment and understand the roles in which the NFL wants their players to play, and they're willing to overpay for speed. Prime example, you got guys that stretch the field. You've got Gabriel Davis, who's been a valuable piece of the Buffalo Bills the last couple of years. You've had Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a valuable part of the Kansas City Chiefs, even if he's not putting up super high stat lines, which MVS was not. MVS is not a superstar from our perspective. What he does do is he forces defenses to stretch, and that allows everything else to operate. And if teams don't defend that, MVS can make catches, even though, he's down the field. He's never had great hands, but the NFL views him that way. And if Xavier Worthy is also viewed that way, right? He's 5'11", but 165. Just really skinny dude. If you look at his picture, he is a skinny man, but he can zoom past defenses. And if you've got a rocket of an arm quarterback, let the kid run down the field. And I mean, John Ross ran 4.22 back in 2017. So you have Xavier Worthy, who also played along Adonai Mitchell this past season. And I think Worthy can be like a number 2 pretty easily on the team. We've heard the Deshaun Jackson comps, and that's possible. It's just a very, very slight frame. And so our concerns are, of course, is he going to be big enough and strong enough against NFL defenses, against really tough safeties, to take some big hits, or is he going to be fragile? And so those are some concerns of our teams willing to put him in that spot moving forward. But I think a team is willing to give him first round draft capital. We're getting a lot of buzz about, are we going to get 6, 7, 8 wide receivers in the first round? And a lot of them are going to be in this back half. And a lot of these teams in the back half of the first round are going to be looking for wide receivers who will complement, right? These are not alpha wide receivers in the back half of the first round. But who we are looking for, in the first half of the first round, we've got Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., right? And we've got a few others that, might move a little bit later. But when it comes to Xavier Worthy, right, that elite skill of speed cannot be replicated. Like, you can't teach someone to be fast. You can improve their speed, but you can't teach fast. Like, you can't teach it. And so the big issue for NFL teams is it's going to be irreplaceable. So that's why you have to understand, like, maybe Xavier Worthy is not as valuable in fantasy as he would be in real NFL. And that's probably the take that we need to have of Xavier Worthy. I don't know if he should be a first round pick in our fantasy drafts, even in one quarterback leagues. I'm not sold on that yet. But what I am sold on is that an NFL team is going to believe that Xavier Worthy is worthy of being a first-round pick. And I'm going to lean into that pun the whole rest of the evening. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's my understanding. And I don't think the team is going to move away from his speed. He did nothing but help his draft stock come the end of April. So Xavier Worthy, I think, is on track to be a back-end first-round NFL draft pick when we get drafting here in April. And if you want more updates and news, make sure you guys are subscribed to the Player Profiler News channel. We're going to keep bringing you great stuff. You also want to check out playerprofiler.com/news. And we've got updated news every day about what are the biggest headlines. And that's where I'm drawing some of these news stories from. We've got some great guys cranking out a ton of awesome content on playerprofiler.com channel. Player Profiler News. We've got the videos. We've got shorts. If you go to playerprofiler.com/news, you'll see the blurb. But for most of those blurbs, you'll also see a video. Emerson's great with it. Tyler is great with it. Brendan and Johnny and Mike are great with them. Jeremiah, of course, great with his. We've got a lot of awesome guys who are doing video content as well for us. John does a great job as well. So shout out to all of you who have been creating videos along with all of the written content for playerprofiler.com/news. And you can subscribe on YouTube, Player Profiler News YouTube channel. All right, before we get into more news items, we have a word about our Dynasty Dominator app, which is it's dynasty season. All these trades and transactions and all of these things are going to be very important for your dynasty leagues. So let's hear from Matt Kelly about the Dynasty Dominator app.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add Superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from Player Profiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
That's right. The Dynasty Dominator app will be well worth it. Make sure you guys are downloading it. Super cheap. It's worth investing in because you will see those dividends pay off in your strategy in your Dynasty leagues. Make sure you don't lose another Dynasty trade again. We've got two teams who have made some pretty significant cuts over the last few days, and that is the Buffalo Bills and the Seattle Seahawks. Both teams freeing up over $25 million in cap space. There's not really a lot of fantasy news directly related to these signings, but it does allow for the Seahawks and the Bills to be getting their cap right before free agency and before the NFL draft. So the Seahawks released Jamal Adams, who was acquired in a trade with the Jets. The Jets won that trade pretty easily. The Seahawks did not get very much out of Jamal Adams. They got about a year out of him, and then he suffered injuries and struggled to come back, etc. Quandre Diggs was also cut. And one of our favorites, Will Dissly, was also released. Unfortunately, he was a favorite of Pete Carroll and would play alongside all of our other Seattle tight ends, Jake Hollister, Noah Fant, you name it. There's a rotating basis of Seattle Seahawks tight ends. But Will Dissly, it's going to be a new era for him. He had dealt with multiple massive knee injuries and somehow battled his way back. But those injuries prevented him from earning a full-time role with the Seahawks. And long story short, so the Seahawks are ushering a new era under coach Mike Macdonald. And the Buffalo Bills are also ushering in a new era. They cut Hyde, they cut Poyer, they cut Deontay Harty, punt returner / wide receiver. Really efficient player. However, just not big enough. He was like 5'6", 150. Was not going to get it done in the real NFL, as a wide receiver. But they paid a lot of money and it just didn't work out. Khalil Shakir, clearly the better wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 behind Davis and Diggs there. And then Nyheim Hines. Many of you may remember Nyheim Hines signed with Buffalo Bills and then suffered a knee injury last offseason, cost him the whole year. He was also cut. So both the Seattle Seahawks and the Buffalo Bills clear up significant cap space. In addition, the Bills also restructured Von Miller to save about $8 million in cap space. So the cap is real. The cap is real. A lot of these negotiations had to happen, or just cuts straight up had to happen. And maybe we'll see some of them re-sign with these teams, but at a much lower rate. However, that's unlikely. We'll see how the dust settles, but ultimately, we are expecting significant changes for the Seattle Seahawks and Buffalo Bills. We also have some franchise tagging news. Michael Pittman was franchise tagged. That's costing the Colts almost $22 million this year. Now, remember, Pittman was one of the first draft picks in the 2020 draft class in the second round. 6'4", 223. He had over 1,100 receiving yards this past season, 109 receptions. But the majority of his season was played with Gardner Minshew, not with Anthony Richardson. Under Richardson, Pittman averaged less than 8 fantasy points per game. Not good. Not good. So you have to wonder, is Pittman going to be a long-term solution for the wide receiver 1 for the Indianapolis Colts? Are the Colts in the business of addressing wide receiver yet again? And I think the answer is yes, because Josh Downs had his flashes, but he is a slot receiver, an undersized slot receiver, and a lot of his production was based upon peppering of targets and not efficiency. Downs was, ultimately unimpressive when it came to the efficiency portion of his game. That didn't translate as well as we would have hoped. And Alec Pierce, who plays on the outside, big body dude, can have the occasional big play, but will never command more than 4 or 5 targets in a game. And he's lucky if he comes down with 3 of them. So 3 for 60 is probably the best case scenario for an Alec Pierce type. So I think the Colts are in the business of addressing the wide receiver position in the draft because there's not really a lot of options when it comes to free agency. I mean, Hollywood Brown is a free agent. Calvin Ridley, certainly a free agent. But the Colts are looking for probably someone who's cheap, who's not going to be too expensive, but also who has production. I wonder if DJ Chark, formerly of the Carolina Panthers and the Detroit Lions, could be an option here. But what I'm expecting out of this is that the Colts are not convinced that Pittman is a long-term answer. I would not be surprised if the Colts are aggressive in addressing the wide receiver position in this draft, trying to at least find a complement for Michael Pittman, or trying to find, hey, is there a guy who can take over if we let Pittman go in for the 2025 season? So a short-term investment for the Colts. They keep him around another year, but we also have to keep in mind that we're not convinced, of Michael Pittman being the number one guy and a long-term solution. At least the Colts are not. And so when we look at like underdog fantasy and where Michael Pittman is going, right, in these way too early, or never too early. It's never too early to be drafting. Michael Pittman is going as the wide receiver 19, ahead of Mike Evans, ahead of Malik Neighbors, ahead of DK Metcalf, ahead of Jalen Waddle. Like, I think that's fine, but give me Pittman, give me Mike Evans over Michael Pittman at that point. So that's my concern, is that Michael Pittman, nothing more than a mid-pack wide receiver 2, and especially I think there's some scary downside with Anthony Richardson, given the game logs, the small sample game logs that we saw while Richardson was healthy and Pittman was also on the field. So probably in that wide receiver 2 range still, I think is safe, but there is a limited capped ceiling for Michael Pittman with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. All right, a couple more pieces of news. We know Dalton Schultz agreed to a 3-year, $36 million deal. Look, Dalton Schultz turned in a 1-year, $6.5 million deal into a additional 3 years and $36 million. Like, double your salary for 3 more years. That's great. He was a massive target and for CJ Stroud and a staple of that offense. They want to return a guy like Dalton Schultz. And Schultz right now is going as the tight end 15 on Underdog Fantasy in round number 11, mid-round 11. A very good value if you want to push some tight ends. This was a player that I think is completely undervalued at this point. Like, give me Dalton Schultz, over where TJ Hawkinson is going right now. I think that there are concerns about David Njoku. Give me Dalton Schultz over Njoku. And I don't think it should be particularly close. Schultz is 1 spot ahead of Musgrave. Like, the Green Bay Packers want to run 2 tight end sets. And so Dalton Schultz, I think, should be, in your tight end 9, 10, 11 range instead of his 15. And maybe we're just haggling. But even though Schultz is not a supreme athlete, he tends to get targets, especially over the middle. And with a healthy Tank Dell and a healthy Nico Collins, the middle of the field is going to be wide open for Dalton Schultz, especially given the touchdowns. So I think this is going to be a good thing for Dalton Schultz for his fantasy value, and also good for CJ Stroud, giving him a nice little floor, a safety valve, someone he can trust and he's worked with before, continuing to build on that chemistry. So very exciting, very good. All right, the last little piece of news is about Mike Evans, and many of us over the weekend did find out that Mike Evans is being, or I guess this was news for Monday. Mike Evans is going to set his career up to hopefully finish with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He signed a 2-year, $52 million deal, $35 million guaranteed. He's had 1,000 receiving yards every single season. And last year, 1,200 receiving yards, 79 receptions, 13 touchdowns, led the NFL in receiving touchdowns, 16.6 fantasy points per game. That was 10th. And I just said Mike Evans is going behind Michael Pittman. Make that make sense. He's the wide receiver 20. No. What? And I know that Mike Evans' ADP has jumped up just a little bit, just a tiny little bit since the signing, but I think this is also a domino effect. We should expect Baker Mayfield to most likely return to Tampa Bay if now that Mike Evans is signed, because now it's Evans and Godwin, Rashad White. I wouldn't be surprised if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go after a tight end. Cade Otton was unimpressive last year. He was just a guy. But in your best ball leagues, Mike Evans is great. And in your win now dynasty leagues, Mike Evans can probably be had for, a high-end second, maybe a late first is probably how you can value him. He's probably going to be good for 2 more years. And we'll see. There were some worries during the Tom Brady era whether Mike Evans still had it, because he was hovering around 20%. He was hovering around 20% target share. And he was just getting touchdowns. So our concern was, is he going to have the target share that's going to be able to sustain long term? And the answer is actually yes. He has been able to sustain even with Baker Mayfield. But Baker looked very, very good in 2023. And so even if Baker moves on in 2024, which I think is unlikely, but if Baker moves on, we could see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being a little aggressive in making sure that they have someone good throwing to Mike Evans. This is the first of the dominoes to prove to Baker Mayfield that they want him to return. And I mean, Baker wants to win. So Mike Evans is one of the players that will help the Tampa Bay Buccaneers continue to win. And he's finally getting the bag. So congratulations to Mike Evans, earning the bag, winning, and hopefully finishing his career as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. That would be certainly something very, very special. And work very hard for Mike Evans to continue to print 1,000-yard seasons. Well, everyone, that's the news update for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like the content, you found this helpful, smash the subscribe button on Player Profiler News channel. Also, check out playerprofiler.com/news, where you can get all the news that you need to make the most informed fantasy football decisions. Until next time, everyone, good luck in fantasy football streets.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com. Dynasty Deluxe, world famous draft kit, rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.